I flew in for my daughter's wedding, paid for my seat, the gifts, and the family hotel. But at the airport, she said, "Stay out of sight. You don't match the aesthetic." So I stepped aside and took back my all money. I stepped into Logan Airport with my carry-on dragging behind me like a ghost of the past, crammed with everything I thought mattered. My wedding dress, folded with care inside lavender-trimmed cloth. The silk nightgown I had bought for the bride's suite. The handmade quilt I stitched with my trembling hands. My grandmother's antique engagement ring nestled in a velvet pouch, and enough cash to cover every expense. Hotel rooms, floral arrangements, limousines, a champagne tower, a reception hall draped in satin. Every stitch, every cent, every bead in that suitcase had been intended to show my daughter that love endures. My heart squeezed with nervous anticipation as I approached security until Madison stepped in my path, chest puffed, her voice sharp enough to cut through the crowd. "You disgusting old hag, get out of my way. You make me look cheap," she snapped, eyes wide and cold. She leaned close enough for every traveler in line to hear her next words. "I am doing you a favor letting you attend. If you want to exist in this wedding, get a job, ring trays, drink service, that is all you are worth." A snort of laughter echoed from behind me, and I dared to glance over my shoulder. There stood the groom's sister, champagne in her hand, lips curled in amusement as she said, "We told her not to bring the help, but she refused to listen. You look the part of the help, that's all you could hope for." It felt as though the terminal lights dimmed, as though the bustle of travelers stopped, just to witness my unraveling. My throat tightened, and I lifted my eyes to the clothing racks in the security queue. The lavender cloth of the wedding dress folded neatly over my arm felt like a cruel joke. The ring, tucked in velvet today, felt like an accusation. Every ounce of love I had packed to honor my daughter's day was being shamed, erased, voided on live display in a public space. I swallowed hard. The knot in my stomach tightened so violently I thought I would collapse. I saw the pastel bridesmaids' dresses, the airport shops selling tiaras, future Mrs. tote bags. Everything in that sterile terminal mocked the tears I had held back for decades. I put my suitcase down. I looked right at Madison. I tried to speak, but only silence escaped my throat. I tried again, but there were no words, only the pounding in my ears. My suitcase bore the weight of a lifetime of sacrifices. Now all I carried was humiliation. By the time my name was called for security screening, I stepped forward automatically. The dress, carefully sealed, passed through the scanner. The ring slipped across the belt to the TSA tray. My quilt, my silk nightgown, the bundle of cash, all made their silent trip through cold metal. The officer asked me for my passport, and I handed it over. I watched Madison turn away, already complaining into her cell phone, "Yeah, she's being escorted to the curb, security's doing the heavy lifting." I realized she would stage everything today, the perfect curated images, the white satin, the laughter caught on camera, but she wanted no trace of me. I closed my eyes briefly as I walked through the security scanner, letting the humiliation wash over me. My daughter, the girl I held in my arms for the first time 35 years ago, treated me as though I were nothing more than background noise at best or an obstacle to erase at worst. My heart felt fragile, like that delicate lace dress folded in lavender. I stepped through the exit lane, picking up my suitcase on the other side, and emerged into the arrival hall. The overhead clocks buzzed softly. A woman in a Rolex scanned her phone for her ride. Children dragged suitcases like they were bricks. No one seemed to notice the trembling old lady clutching her lavender bundle. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I didn't move forward toward the limo line or the waiting shuttle. Instead, I stood still. I whispered to myself, "I carried love in that bag, and I will carry my dignity out of this place." I turned on my heel, suitcase in hand, and walked away from the salon-branded reception shuttle and towards the exit. Each step carried the weight of a shattered expectation, yes, but also the glimmer of a choice. I could leave behind their curated ideal and keep what was mine. The airport doors closed behind me with a soft swoosh. I headed back into the crowd of strangers, my lavender suitcase a quiet testament, and I was not ashamed of the dress, the ring, the nightgown, or the quilt. I was ashamed of nothing but the cruelty I had carried. Yet somewhere in that shame was an ember of something else, something hotter than all of their contempt. and I would not stomp it out today. Under the dim hotel light, I unzipped my lavender suitcase with trembling hands. The lace sleeves of my wedding dress peeked out, soft and yellowed with age, but still elegant, still proud. I had spent 3 days steaming it, repairing the hem with invisible stitches and wrapping it in a hand-embroidered handkerchief my mother had sewn before she passed. Every thread was memory. Every bead was a breath from a life that had loved too hard, too long. I cradled the dress in my arms, walked carefully down the hall, and knocked on the suite door where Madison and her bridal team were getting ready. I could hear laughter inside, glasses clinking, heels clicking against marble, the rustle of expensive gowns. When the door opened, she barely looked up from her phone. I held out the dress. I thought, maybe, just for a photo? It's the dress I wore when I married your father. Your grandmother sewed it by hand. I thought. Madison's eyes flicked up, briefly. Then she barked out a sharp laugh. No one wears that crap now. I stood there, the lace brushing my arm as she snapped a selfie. It's not vintage, it's pathetic, she added, turning back to her bridesmaids. Like, what even is that? Is it polyester? Ew. The door slammed before I could reply. I stood in that hallway for nearly a full minute, holding the dress like a corpse in my arms. They did not see it. Not the hours my mother spent sewing by candlelight. Not the night I stitched it myself at 23, altering the waistline when I found out I was pregnant. Not the fact that I had carried that dress across 3 states, steamed it in my tiny kitchen, packed it with lavender satchels to keep the scent of dust away. They saw only fabric, not sacrifice. Back in my hotel room, one I had reserved and paid for under my name, I sat on the edge of the bed. I stared at the itinerary left on the nightstand, reception details, floral delivery, shuttle times, all addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Carver, my daughter's future aunt-in-law. My name appeared nowhere. I reached for the event binder I had helped prepare. Every tab, every deposit slip, every RSVP, I had handled it all. From the venue retainer to the hotel blocks, from the dress alterations to the calligraphy place cards. And yet, the official guest list was printed on a gold-trimmed scroll, displayed on a foam board in the lobby beside a vase of fresh peonies. I looked. My name was not there. Not as mother of the bride, not as Emily Hale, not at all. I asked the concierge. He looked confused. "Oh, are you with the catering staff?" "No," I said, voice catching. "I'm the bride's mother." He blinked. "Oh," that was all. "Oh," I returned to my room and opened the envelope I had kept at the bottom of my bag. The invoice for the venue, the floral deposit receipt, the transportation wire confirmation. All paid in full. All by me. And yet, my room key didn't even work for the bridal floor. I had to be buzzed in. Twice. Later, when I tried to enter the ballroom to preview the rehearsal dinner seating, a young coordinator stopped me. "VIP family only," she said. "I am family. I'm sorry, you're not on the list." I looked down at my hands, the same hands that sewed Madison's Halloween costumes, packed her lunchboxes, wrote notes in her textbooks, the same hands that had wired $18,000, 0 cents, 2 weeks ago when the florist claimed the tulips had to be flown in from Holland. Now, those hands were not enough to earn me a seat. I stood in the corridor and watched as Eleanor, her soon-to-be aunt by marriage, glided in, wearing a champagne satin gown. People clapped. She smiled. Someone whispered, "She's basically her second mother." I had never heard a phrase so sharp. Not a dagger, but a dismemberment. I went back to my room. I laid the dress out across the bed, smoothing the sleeves with my palm. I pressed my hand against the bodice where my heart had once beat on my wedding day. I remembered how I looked into Madison's father's eyes and whispered, "She'll be our legacy. She'll know what love is." And now, 35 years later, that same girl had looked at that same dress and called it rags. I folded it back into the cloth, slowly, tenderly, with more reverence than the whole wedding had offered me. Then I picked up the RSVP list again. I scanned the names, hundreds of them. I found the line for benefactor. It listed Eleanor Carver and family. I found the floral sponsor event proudly underwritten by the Carver Hale Foundation. That foundation had been formed using my maiden name, combined with Eleanor's, without my knowledge, without my consent. I called the event coordinator. I asked to see the receipts. They had been rerouted, months ago. All future confirmations sent to Eleanor's office email. I sat in silence, my hands trembling. It was not just exclusion, it was erasure. They had planned this, quietly, carefully. Let me pay, but take no credit. Let me sew, but never sit. Let me give, but never be seen. The dress sat on the bed, its sleeves curled like reaching arms. I stared at it for a long time, and then I whispered, I was never invited, was I? Not truly. I had been tolerated, temporarily useful, a relic of obligation, not celebration, and that realization, silent, sharp, unspeakable, cut deeper than any insult at the airport, because it was not said aloud. It was designed, and it worked. I followed the soft hum of voices and clinking champagne glasses down the plush carpeted corridor of the grand reception hall. I felt like a ghost in a home I built with my own hands, each step echoing with memories I had hoped would be honored today. The door stood slightly ajar, and through it I glimpsed the banquet tables, draped in pale blush linens, each place setting meticulously arranged with monogrammed napkins and gleaming silverware. The florist's scent, peonies, ranunculus, and garden roses, floated in the air, masking the sterile scent of polished marble. A server brushed past me and glanced at my lavender suitcase, still draped with the lace gown I had offered moments ago. He tilted his head and said quietly, as if sharing some inside secret, "You part of the catering crew, ma'am? We're overstaffed today." I swallowed, nodded, and forced a polite smile, though my heart shattered with every syllable. "Just finding my seat," I whispered. He nodded and pointed down the hallway toward a door marked Event Staff Entrance. I turned away and sat on a velvet bench outside the ballroom's gilded doors. From here I could hear them, the low hum of conversation, then the laughter, sharp, practiced hardwood floor laughter, the glint of her voice rising above the others. I closed my eyes, trying to reconcile decades of sacrifice with the stranger my daughter had become. This was the hall I had reserved, with deposits wired weeks ago. This was the room I had planned, where I once dreamed I would walk her down an aisle of her own choosing. Now, that vision stung like broken glass. The realization that I had paid for every inch of this place and that I was unwelcome inside made my breath catch in my throat. I looked down at my hands. These were the hands that washed dishes so she could afford piano lessons, that folded school uniforms in the early mornings, that planted tomatoes and sunflowers in our backyard so I could say we had a garden. These same hands had wired the payment to the venue. These hands had held her tight after her first heartbreak, and these hands had acted as my own best friends as I buried my husband and rebuilt my life. But today those hands meant nothing. I sighed and fumbled with the suitcase's handle, delicate, antiquated, weighted with regret. I stared at the ornate ballroom doors. People passed me, trolleys rolling past, shadows on the other side of frosted glass. I imagined the photographs being taken, the toasts being given, the embraces in satin gowns and shiny tuxedos. I thought of the dress I had offered, a relic of a life she once valued. But she had called it crap. She had told the bridesmaids to laugh when I showed them my hand-sewn lace. I remembered the flush of shame around that buffet edge, the flush now embedded in my heart. One of the servers began rearranging chairs near me. I walked past him, pretending to head toward my assigned seat, though I had no aisle, no table number. The digital nameboard flashed, reserved to Hale Carver Foundation, hers and the interloper aunt. My name did not appear. I kept walking, stopping at an alcove with a small drink cart. There was a table glimmering with crystal water glasses and ice, untouched by bridesmaids. I poured a glass of water and held it, pretending to refresh myself. I allowed a single tequila lime salted tear to run down my cheek. No one noticed. Then I heard it, the laughter, high and metallic, more echo than warmth, and there she was at the head table. Madison, beaming over the crowd, radiant in a custom gown made for red carpets, not solemn family vows. She nodded at me once, but her gaze slid to someone else before I could respond. It was as though she had scanned the room and registered me as an afterthought, like furniture that didn't match. "She showed up," Madame Bridesmaid said to her friend next to her, loud enough for me to hear it at some 10 feet away. "But she's stayed where she's told, sweet. I swallowed the sour taste in my mouth and forced a small nod. The photographer appeared at my elbow and asked, "Please, ma'am, could you step out of the shot?" I shook my head. He frowned, stepped back, jostling his assistant with the camera bag between them. He whispered, "VIP entrance only." I gave him a slight nod and moved further along the wall. No one asked if I was okay. No one slipped me a glass of wine. No one introduced me as the person paying for this room, the linens, the very air they were breathing today. I studied the exquisite floral arrangement at the center of each table, how delicate the petals, how precise the foam underneath, how just one dropped bloom would ruin the effect. It struck me that all that care, that time, and all that money had been spent to create a picture where I did not exist. My cell phone vibrated, a text from home, a neighbor checking in. Did I make it? I could not reply. I could not put words inside me anymore. I pressed the glass of water to my lips and sipped slowly, trying to keep my tears from spilling. I looked at the ring hidden in my pocket, the heirloom I had saved to bestow upon Madison as a symbol of family legacy. She didn't even know it existed. I had told her once when she was 10, "This ring is our legacy." She had shrugged and walked away. And here it was, still nestled in velvet, making me feel older and younger all at once. The head table rose for a toast. Madison stood, raising a champagne flute. She spoke about love that rises above baggage, how she was grateful for support from those who matched her aesthetic, how she would build that legacy with our mother figure, Eleanor. I closed my eyes, tasting grief, tasting madness, tasting the betrayal of expectations. I stood slowly, brushed my hand over my dress. If anyone saw me, they saw a small, dignified woman. A dress, slightly wrinkled, but still pure. Then I turned my back to the ballroom and continued walking down the corridor toward the elevators. Downstairs, the kitchen door was marked, "Staff only." I passed it and slipped inside. The chefs rushed past me, hauling plates of seared scallops and truffle risotto. The scent of butter and garlic filled my nostrils. I found an empty corner by a window where the steamers thawed bread, where pastry chefs wiped flour from their cheeks. The heat was comforting. The frenzy around me was honest, no pretenses, no curated smiles. I gently opened my suitcase and reached in for the ring that symbolized a love older than this day, the ring I had carried through airports and hallways, through insult and indifference. It felt heavier now. I slipped it onto a finger I hardly recognized, my aged, knotted finger, the one that had held wedding bouquets and baby bottles and self-restraint for 35 years. I closed the suitcase and placed it back on top. I stood and pulled my shawl tighter. The chefs looked at me strangely, but I offered a nod. I gave them credit. They did what they were paid to do. Maybe they even believed in the illusion they were building upstairs. But I knew better. Illusions end, reality remains. I left the kitchen, headed toward the service elevator. I would go find a bar, a bench at the airport lounge, anything but here, because every inch of this hall was a tapestry woven to exclude me. I would refuse to play my part in it any longer. As I exited the ballroom entrance, I paused at the threshold. Light dimmed behind me, a wall of warm laughter, of sparkling flutes, of illusory joy. I turned my back, firmly, lifted my head and walked out, leaving behind the hall where they had silenced me, the dress they mocked, the mother who had sacrificed so much only to be unseen. I found the service elevator, pressed L, and descended away from the grandeur and gossip, toward service hallways clean but unadorned, toward solitude known and chosen. I did not cry. I did not collapse. I found my dignity in each step, and as I stepped onto the lobby floor, I held myself straight, suitcase in hand, walking among them but apart from them, the wedding ring heavy in my pocket, the echo of her laughter trailing behind. I walked slowly out of that hotel, resolved that I would not beg for love, not today, not ever again. I slipped into a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, away from the clinking glasses and the soft hum of bridal chatter. My hands still trembled from the confrontation I had endured, both at the airport and in those gilded hallways where I had walked like a ghost. I opened my purse, which held only the essentials, and took out my phone. My thumb hovered for a moment over the bank app icon. Every tiny noise in the lobby felt amplified in my ears. The distant laughter, the rustle of silk gowns, the whir of the elevator. I tapped the icon, entered my credentials, and felt that familiar rush I always got when seeing bank balances and pending transfers displayed clearly. Here it was, the wedding fund. Every dollar I had been asked, no, told to send was recorded here. The floral bill, $18,247.00. The limousine services, $4,995.00. The reception venue deposit, $12,000.00. The hotel blocks for guests, $10,560.00. And countless little charges: champagne tower, chair covers, place cards, rehearsal dinner, bridesmaid bouquets, groom's cake. All paid by me, Emily Hale, mother of the bride. But something made me pause. I had insisted on viewing every request, line by line, before authorizing. It was never about control. It was about respect. It was about being treated like a mother, not an afterthought. And after today, after Madison called me a disgusting old hag, after she sent me to the staff entrance, after she mocked the wedding dress I wore, the lace she said was pathetic, something had changed. I scrolled through Instagram and saw the first wedding photos, filtered smiles, soft lighting, Madison in her sleek gown, an image posted by one of the bridesmaids, captioned, "Celebrating pure love, no baggage, no burdens, just joy." I let my thumb rest on the stories icon. There it was, a slideshow of floral arches, full tables, champagne flutes raised in a toast. My breath caught. Pure love, no history, no mother. I felt anger, hurt, rage, and then clarity. I tapped the first payment request, the florist. I hit cancel, transfer. My heart pounded like a drum. Then I did the limousine invoice, then the venue deposit. One by one, I canceled them all. I tapped gracefully through each category, canceling payment after payment, leaving them stuck in an electronic limbo. Combing payments, floral artist, canceled. Limousine services, canceled. Venue deposit, ballroom 3, canceled. Photography package, canceled. Guest room block, canceled. Floral centerpieces, canceled. Champagne tower, canceled. Music and sound, canceled. Catering deposit, canceled. Event coordination fee, canceled. I leaned back and clasped my trembling hands. My phone screen glowed with the word "candled" next to each vendor. I closed the app. It was all there, my money, my labor, my heart, and now none of it would go to waste on an event that didn't want me in it. I took a deep breath. I felt lighter, strangely empowered. Moments later, I saw the coordinator rush through the lobby, phone in hand, face pale. She glanced at me. I nodded at the polished marble floors, and she paused, confusion flickering in her eyes as though trying to read the code between my soul and my posture. I turned away, brushing past a pillar, taking my seat on a leather couch, my suitcase resting at my feet. The lobby clock glowed 3:14 p.m. My phone nudged with notifications. Payment failed. Transfer declined. Payment canceled by sender. A series of vendor calls, but the calm voice inside me said, "Not my problem." It was twisted irony. The woman who had called me ugly, cheap, not part of the aesthetic, they would now scramble to salvage this day. And it was all unfolding because I had paid for it. I felt both satisfied and sorrowful. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the couch's cushioned back. I felt the quilted pattern. I thought of the wedding dress I had offered, wrapped in lavender. I thought of Madison's laughter, her dismissal of everything I had ever given. I thought of the word she had used, hag. That word rolled through me, stuck in my throat. Every lacy stitch she had called crap came to mind. I could still feel the delicate embroidery beneath my fingers. I could still smell the perfume of months spent ironing it at midnight. I resolved, silently, I will protect that dress. It will stay folded in lavender cloth. It will stay in my closet, the closet where I keep all the stories no one else heard. I reached into my bag, took out the silk nightgown, and ran my palm over the satin. I remembered packing it, wanting her to feel special that first night as a bride. A new chapter. I felt a pang of grief. And then I felt something stronger. I deserved that nightgown more than she did. I deserved the flowers more than they did. I deserved the peace of knowing I had not been erased. I stood and walked toward the elevators leading back to my room. I had a plane to catch, to nowhere. I just needed time. To take back my dignity, to breathe without judgment, to remember who I was beyond the chaotic sheen their world demanded. On the elevator, the doors slid closed behind me. I pressed the lobby button. The gentle hum replaced the shouting, the laughter, the clinking china I would never hold. My reflection flickered in the polished metal door. A woman in a worn trench coat, lavender scarf, determined eyes. Not a hag, not a relic, not a statistic in her wedding album. I reached floor 1 and stepped off the elevator. The lobby doors and the outside light welcomed me like old friends. The sky was unknown above, but I had found clarity. I had found dignity. The weekend horizon opened before me, no floral arches, no satin sheets, but a truth. I was real. I was seen, and for once, that was enough. I held my head high, set my suitcase on the moving walkway, and moved toward the automatic doors that would carry me far from this hall, far from the illusion of perfection, far from the daughter who had replaced me in name but failed to erase me in truth. Tonight I would have peace. Not their curated version, my own. The wedding van never showed. No white stretch limo, no shuttle bus, nothing but an empty curb where the driver should have been waiting. I hovered in the lobby doorway, watching guests shuffle in with nervous smiles, checking phones, asking staff what was wrong. The florist had abandoned the setup, no arch, no centerpieces. The reception hall looked like a hollow shell, tables bare, place settings absent, draped linens still rolled at the corner. I could almost hear the air gasp in disappointment. The event staff gathered outside, some whispering urgently with frowns. A catering manager marched into the foyer, phone pressed to his ear, insisting on payment in full now or he would walk. I slipped away from their frantic voices, walking casually past the unattended drink stations and through the wide-open doors, emerging onto the cobblestone courtyard outside the hotel. Crowds murmured as they arrived, peering around corners, following bridesmaids in pastel gowns toward a darkened ballroom. A few stopped dead when they saw the half-assembled arch and missing floral donations. Whispers followed them in broken waves. Did she bail on her own wedding? Is the venue even open? I thought this was rescheduled. What happened? The groom stood at the entrance, his tuxedo perfectly pressed, but his face chalk white. He pressed his hand against the marble wall, trying to steady himself. He met my eyes for just a moment as I passed, and mouthed one desperate word. "Mom?" I did not nod. I did not speak. I watched as he turned away when a bridesmaid flitted toward him, full of panic and apologies in equal measure. The bride was already openly weeping, shoulder quivering, makeup running, hand clutching a crumpled wedding program. She faced the empty driveway where limos should have glimmered under wedding lights. Mi chua tra tian a. Mi dang dua sang. Mi noi gidi chu. Her voice rang like glass in the courtyard, and the guests fell silent. I stood a few feet away, suitcase in hand. The only thing humming was the drone of a half-packed speaker system trying to provide ceremony music that would never play. I stepped forward slowly, letting my heels click on the stone. Under the courtyard lights, my features were lit with both sadness and steel. She pointed at me, tears shining in her throat. "You ruined my wedding," she yelled. Her voice shook louder than the storm of broken expectations inside the lobby behind her. I tilted my head, considered her, the quilts in my bag, the dress I had offered, the quilted silk nightgown I had hoped she'd slip into after the ceremony, the antique ring I had carried, the money I had wired, the hotel rooms I had booked, the flowers I had ordered, every last detail under my name. I saw the confusion in the guests' eyes as she accused me. Some looked sympathetic, others looked stunned, some shuffled out, clearly thinking the bride had snapped. I breathed, reached into my coat pocket and felt the weight of the ring again. Then I said it clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Noi no." The words floated in the air. She looked at me, surprise, anger, something almost like betrayal. She turned away, voice labeled again. "You will die alone. You are unfit to be a mother." Her cry cracked the night. But I had no more tears to lose. I lifted my suitcase by the handle, dusted off the bottom, and walked away. My stride was slow, deliberate, until I stepped beyond the courtyard lights and into the empty street. No guests followed, no taxi blocked my path. I found a silent bench near a street lamp and sat. The glassy windows of the hotel reflected me back. a solitary figure who had given everything and still held her head high. I stayed there until the wind cooled me. I felt the suitcase beside me and the wedding dress folded neatly inside. I could have discarded it tonight, but I would not. It belonged to me. So did the ring. So did the dignity buried and reclaimed. When a late-night bus passed, I flagged it. The driver leaned out, startled to see an elegantly dressed older woman with a suitcase at this hour. I tapped on the glass. "One ticket to the airport, please." He nodded slowly, opened the door, and I stepped out. As the bus rolled away from the silent hotel, the courtyard lights dripped into the past. I imagined the reception hall now, its centerpiece missing, its candles unlit, its laughter silenced. I did not look back. I only thought, some dresses are meant to be worn, some quilts are meant to wrap you, not define you. And today, I wore nothing but truth. I closed my eyes on that bus, felt my heart steady, and let the world fade while I remade myself in the quiet hum of the night, heading toward somewhere I was welcome, where I could grieve, heal, and hold what I had carried. A mother's love that could never be canceled. The video of that night landed on social media before sunrise. It began with a shot from behind a bridesmaid's phone, a frail figure emerging into a spotlight under the courtyard lights, my lavender suitcase rolling behind me, and then Madison's voice, raw with pain and rage. "You ruined my wedding." She pointed at me as though I were a phantom haunting her perfect day. The clip cut to me standing still, tears glistening in my eyes. I spoke calmly yet firmly. "Where I am not welcomed, I do not belong." Then, suitcase in hand, I turned and walked away. No flourish, no drama, just truth. The title went up 10 minutes later. She canceled her own wedding because her mother canceled her forgiveness. It caught like wildfire. On Twitter, outraged viewers debated, who raises a daughter who pays for her own mother, then begs forgiveness? Mother's money, mother's heartbreak, this one hurts. Reddit thread titles exploded. Mother funded every inch, got told to leave when the bride writes off her actual mother. Imagine paying for your wedding and getting ghosted. This is the modern motherhood crisis. Fashion collaborators? Ghosted. The couture dress sponsor withdrew support. The wedding planners company removed the event from its portfolio. Madison woke to the news, offline, away from phones. She was handed a printout backstage at a bridal expo the next day. "Your mother walked away with her dignity. The world stands by her." The headlines blazed. "Bride abandoned by mom who paid for it all." A fashion brand she was launching quietly pulled its launch. Investors emailed, pausing campaigns, citing brand risk. Even Madison's university friend, now running a high-profile magazine blog, posted her story. My heart breaks for a mother whose daughter, blinded by curated perfection, forgot the one who raised her. I did not seek their attention. I did not strike back on social media. I sat in my small living room, phone muted, eyes steady, my coffee steamed in silence. Messages came in, from old classmates. "I cried for your courage." From women with whoring mothers at home. "I had to call mine today." From mothers I had met at PTA decades ago. "You made me realize I matter." I even got a message from Madison's college roommate. She said, "I never saw her like that before. My mother," that one struck me deepest. I was looking for justice. I was looking for acknowledgement. And here it was, strangers calling me Mother of the Year. I wasn't viral. I was visible. By evening, Madison's phone lit up with apology messages from relatives, former classmates, even her fiancé's friends. "Your mother should have been the guest of honor. The real mother of the bride just schooled your world." She lost followers, sponsors dropped. Investors backed out. My phone stayed silent. I had already collected what I needed. My truth, my peace, my dignity. The world watched my walk. They saw the mother who paid and walked away. And somehow, that mattered more than any speech or staged embrace. My impact flowed in ripples, through screens, across campuses, inside hearts. Because when a mother funds a wedding, but demands only respect in return, sometimes she must take back what never belonged to perform that lesson. And that lesson, it belonged to her. To me, 3 a.m. My phone lit up in the silence of my small apartment, the glow startling in the darkness. I saw her name, Madison Hale, staring back at me. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering, bracing myself for the storm I knew was coming. "Mom." Her voice trembled the moment she spoke, half whispered through muffled sobs. "Mom, please, you have to help me. You have the money. You know I do. I'm being sued. Vendors are suing, investors are pulling out, sponsors are gone. I don't know what to do. Everyone's turned on me." The rest of the world shut out as I pictured that wedding courtyard, the empty driveways, the flowers that never arrived. I imagined her standing before the crowd, tears streaming, voice breaking, begging me to save her from a day that had turned into a disaster. It felt surreal, like the script of a tragedy, rewritten live. But that moment, like every moment before it, was real. "Mom, they said you took back all the money. The floral company is going after us. The limo service filed a lien. Hotel rooms are unpaid." She choked on her words, and for a moment I thought she might collapse on the spot. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I heard her whisper, "You don't understand what I gave up for this. My reputation, my brand." "Brand," I repeated softly. "Love is not a brand." I could almost smell the brine of her tears through the phone. "Mom," she pleaded, voice small again, almost like a frightened child. "Mom, please." I walked to the window and looked out at the little orange tree I had planted 2 years ago. It had grown from the seed I planted the night the suitcase burst open on her wedding day. The tree was blooming with small buds, even in the early spring morning. Dragging that suitcase, feeling the horizon shrink behind me, I planted that seed to remind myself that life grows, even from seeds of betrayal. I rested my palm against the glass, feeling the rough bark of the plant in my memory. And finally I spoke, each word deliberate. "Madison, when I gave you money, I expected love, respect. Not silence, not shame. You shut me out, on television, in your vows, in your heart. You curated a wedding without me, painted it perfect, and mocked everything I stood for." Her sobs rattled through the phone again. "I saved every penny for this day," she said, through quivering breaths. "I thought, when I graduated, when this day came, you thought you'd have perfection. You thought love meant obedience." I closed my eyes. "When you shut the door on your mother, you didn't just lose me. You found the open gates of hell." Her voice broke. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't think it through. I just saw my chance, my moment, and I lost myself." She was gasping now, tears thick enough to sink a ship. I didn't reach for the phone to cradle it. I didn't rush to cry with her. Instead, I held still and listened to the truth in her voice. Her next words were raw. "They're going to take everything. I don't even know who I am without the wedding. Mom, please, I need you." I could feel the ache behind that request, the hollow echo of a dream undone, the betrayal of expectations built on curated images, the collapse of everything she thought she had. But tears weren't enough tonight. I heard her swallow, brave, embarrassed. "Please." "Madison," I began, and even in that dark hour I detected the difficulty of saying her name, the weight it carried. "I'm not your bailout. I'm not your emergency fund. I'm not your dress, your centerpiece, your staged photo op. I'm your mother, the one you ignored when it mattered most." She fell silent. I heard nothing but ragged breathing. I traced the outline of that orange tree in my mind again, how fragile its first bloom had been, how tenacious its roots. I thought of the suitcase I had carried away, still buried in the garage under a stack of old quilts, and of the dress wrapped in lavender cloth that now hung quietly in my closet. "And I made a choice," I said, voice low but firm. "I chose dignity. I chose self-respect. I chose to let go of a day that meant nothing if it meant losing myself. Even at your expense." She wept quietly. I could almost see her, head bowed, shoulders shaking, the remnants of makeup glistening like fractured moonlight. I felt my heart twist inside me. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her love is bigger than this moment, to give her everything she asked for, but doing so would unravel me, drain me of the dignity I had found amid that chaos. She whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear, "Mother, That's when I made my decision. "Goodbye, Madison," I said, the words growing heavier as I spoke them. "I am flying to Hawaii in 2 hours. My money is going with me." And then I hung up. I left the phone on the dresser in my small apartment and walked quietly to the closet. Inside, behind coats and scarves, I found the lavender garment bag. I unzipped it gently and stared at the lace dress, at the embroidery done by a generation of women before me. I pressed my hand to the satin lining and felt the thrum of years of hope, worry, unspoken love. I folded it carefully, placed it back in its lavender cloth, zipped the garment bag, and placed it in the corner next to the suitcase I had carried that morning. I closed the closet door without a creak. My flight to Honolulu would leave soon. I retrieved the suitcase, packed the dress and nightgown, the ring, the quilt, and a few essentials. I left the rest behind: bills, receipts, heartbreak. I felt the quilted fabric of the nightgown against my cheek as I zipped the case closed. As I walked toward the door, I glanced back at the orange tree in the pot by the windowsill. One bloom had fully opened, and I whispered, "Welcome, wings, Mama. I'll find you in that bloom." I stepped outside into the dawn light and called a cab. By noon, I would be airborne. By evening, I would touch warm sand. Tonight, I will lie under a sky that doesn't judge me for choosing myself, because sometimes the greatest love a mother can show is to let go of a poisoned paradise. And tonight, it was time to fly home to peace. I settled into the shade of a frangipani tree beside a small seaside cafe in Maui, the air warm with the scent of hibiscus and salt. I pressed my hands around a steaming cup of green tea, watching morning light dance across the waves. In my lap rested a small paper-wrapped gift for Lily, my neighbor's little girl, 6 years old, who called me Grandma and thought I could do anything. Inside, a simple seashell charm bracelet I'd selected for her from a local artisan, with tiny starfish and pearls. The ocean honked its soprano behind me as I closed my eyes and reflected on the words I had spoken at dawn. Not everyone in a wedding dress deserves to be a bride. Not everyone who gives birth deserves to be a mother. But I was her mother, completely. Each syllable warmed my heart like this island sun, brittle with truth and freedom. A breeze rustled the palm fronds overhead, and I looked down at the pebble path leading to the beach. I thought again of that wedding, stripped of flowers, limousines, warmth, and the echoes of laughter I would never walk beside again. I was safe here, removed from the curated world of perfection she had built. Here, waves didn't judge. They welcomed all who came ashore. I turned toward the air-conditioned cafe behind me and caught sight of Lily skipping along the walkway, her sandals swinging. She looked up at me with bright curiosity. I stood and greeted her, handing over the gift. She untied the ribbon carefully and opened the box, eyes lighting up as the charm bracelet shimmered. "Oh, Grandma, it's beautiful," she exclaimed, sliding it onto her wrist. "Thank you." Her face reminded me of my daughter's when she was that age, full of wonder, free from resentment. I felt a soft smile play across my lips as she stretched the seashell charms with childlike delight. Then, timid and solemn, she asked, "Did the bride ever come back, Grandma? The one who left the wedding?" I felt the weight of the question settle like seaweed at my feet. I knew she referred not just to me, but to the girl whose perfect wedding had unraveled. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and looked out at the horizon. "No," I told her slowly, my voice steady. "No, she did not come back, and I am not waiting any more." Lily blinked, as if she expected me to say otherwise. "Are you sad?" she asked quietly. I looked into her eyes, the pure, unsullied knowing of a child. I realized then that Lily's world still saw the good in people. She believed in happy endings. And maybe this time, I could let her. "I am not sad," I explained. "Sadness comes from wanting something that cannot be, but I feel peace. I learned that peace waits where acceptance grows." Lily beamed at me. "Can I go swim?" she asked, glancing excitedly toward the water. I nodded. "Yes, but don't go too far. Wave if you need me." She gave me a quick hug and ran toward the shoreline, her laughter mingling with drifting ukulele strings from a nearby musician. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the warmth fill me. The chair beneath me was comfortable. So was the silence. In that stillness, I reflected on the life I had before the wedding, the years of working 2 jobs, raising my daughter alone after her father passed, the quilts, dresses, meals, missed nights of sleep. I thought of the birth certificate I framed, hidden in a drawer, proving who I was. I thought of the suitcase packed with lavender and lace. I thought of my choice. When she said brand, I chose self-respect over drama. Here and now, I realized that my body had carried more than a suitcase. It carried decades of love, words unsaid, tears unshed. It carried dignity that I reclaimed one late-night bus at a time. It carried this calm. The sea breeze nudged me, reminding me I was alive. I looked down at the bracelet on Lily's wrist. "May it remind you of this day," I whispered, "that love can start small and grow wide." I pulled my scarf tighter and sat still until Lily's laughter turned into shouts diving into water. A few minutes later she waved, tiny fingers flitting, like lizards in the sun. I nodded. She used to run to me when life felt heavy. Now she saw a grandmother in bloom. I sipped my tea again, watching her swim. I wondered what she believed of weddings, mothers, daughters, but decided childlike joy was the beginning of vision, not resentment. After a while, the cafe owner, a Hawaiian woman named Kiai, brought me a plate of fresh papaya and pineapple. "On the house," she said softly. "You look like someone who has stories to tell. Stay as long as you need." I accepted the fruit and a grateful smile. I looked at the bracelet, the calm sea, the sunlight, recognizing that all I needed was still unfolding, thread by thread, bloom by bloom. When the afternoon's breeze cooled to a gentle hush, I rose and walked toward the water's edge. I took off my shoes and stepped into the warm tide, letting each wave roll over my ankles. I felt grounded, whole, present. The wedding had been a storm. Heartbreak had poured, but here the sea washed it clean. As I walked further into the surf, I felt an initial pang of loss. She had missed seeing me stand tall in the sand where she once stood. But those pangs receded, replaced by something sweeter, the knowledge that I had not bowed. I had chosen clarity over chaos, purpose over performance, and in doing so I had severed the power she held over my narrative. I closed my eyes, letting the waves cradle the memories. The sun warmed my face. A distant ukulele player called out aloha, and I whispered it back. Not "I miss you," not "I forgive you," but "I see you," to life, to myself, to what had been rebuilt from falling. I stepped from the sea back to the pebble shore. The sunlight glittered off waters like scattered diamonds. Lily's laughter grew closer. The bracelet jingled as she ran to greet me. I knelt and hugged her, whispering, "Welcome home," and I felt at home, mended by goodbye, anchored in love, free to be exactly who I am. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the quiet strength of women who raise children only to be forgotten, then you're not alone. There are so many of us. Mothers who gave everything, grandmothers who were laughed at, women who were told they were too old, too plain, too much of a burden. But we remember, and now we speak. If you want more stories like this, true stories from the quietest women in the room, subscribe to Grandma True because revenge has no expiration date, and sometimes the softest goodbye is the loudest justice of all. Subscribe now, share this story, and never forget, when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.